My name is Bianca Torres. I'm 28 years old, and for 4 years of my life, I raised children that weren't mine. Not in the way people imagine when they hear that sentence. There were no heartfelt conversations where we all agreed this was temporary. No family meeting, no plan. It just happened. Slowly, quietly. Until one day I realized my entire life revolved around someone else's choices. After my catering business collapsed during the pandemic, I had nothing left but debt, a bruised ego, and exhaustion so deep it felt permanent. I packed up what I could fit into my old Honda Civic and moved in with my older sister Stella, telling myself it was just until I got back on my feet. That was 4 years ago. Since then, I became the backbone of her household. The invisible one. The one who showed up before anyone asked, because if I didn't, no one else would. Every weekday started the same way. My alarm screamed at 5:15 a.m., long before the sun even thought about rising. I rolled out of bed, my muscles already aching, and padded into the kitchen to start breakfast. David, 14 and permanently annoyed at the world, was usually already awake, arguing with his sister Sophia, 11, about something trivial that somehow felt life or death to them. "You ate my waffle yesterday," Sophia yelled, slamming the freezer door. "I did not," David shot back, scrolling through his phone like she didn't exist. I'd break the last waffle in half before things escalated, just as Mason, 9, inevitably spilled juice across the counter while asking me a completely random question about some country he'd learned about on YouTube. And then there was Luna, 6 years old, soft, clingy, always wrapping herself around my leg while begging for French braids before school. I barely had time to sip lukewarm coffee before ushering them all into the car. The drive to Roosevelt Elementary was chaos on wheels. David blasted music too loud. Sophia complained about her math teacher. Mason asked questions that had no beginning or end. Luna sang movie songs completely off-key. By the time I dropped them off, my head throbbed. And then I went to work. 6 hours at Starbucks, steaming milk, smiling at strangers who barked orders like I was a vending machine. "Make it quick, I'm late," one man snapped, tapping his watch. I earned $16 an hour, enough to cover gas and my phone bill, barely enough to pretend I was surviving. After my shift, I picked the kids up. Homework, dinner, laundry, arguments over whose turn it was to walk Buster, their golden retriever. Stella worked night shifts at Target with her boyfriend Derek, which meant she was either asleep or gone. On a good day, I saw her for 10 minutes. "Thanks for keeping everything together," she'd mumble before collapsing on the couch. I used to think that meant something. At night, after everyone was asleep, I opened my laptop. Web development courses, JavaScript tutorials, a future I could almost touch if I wasn't so tired. I dreamed of switching careers, of building websites, of creating something that belonged to me. Most nights, I fell asleep mid-lesson, woke up to a dead battery and the same sinking feeling in my chest. One night, Sophia wandered out of her room and asked why I always looked tired. "Just trying to keep up," I said, forcing a smile. She hugged me, and for a moment, I felt seen. But the feeling didn't last. I started noticing how much I carried alone. Basketball practices, violin recitals, doctor visits for Luna's allergies, school supplies I paid for with the last of my savings, $14,500 left over from my failed business. Derek never offered a cent. "You're amazing with them," Stella said once, like it was praise. It wasn't. It was permission for her to disappear. One evening, I called my best friend Jasmine, pacing the kitchen while the kids watched TV. "I'm drowning," I whispered. She didn't hesitate. "You're not their mom, Bianca, and you're paying for it like you are." That night, I stared at my unfinished coding project and realized I hadn't submitted an assignment in weeks. I wasn't just tired. I was vanishing. A week later, I was folding laundry when Stella burst through the door, glowing. Derek followed, holding takeout like this was a celebration. "We've got news," Stella said, pulling me toward the couch. "I'm pregnant. 5th kid." My stomach dropped. Another baby. Another sacrifice. And in that moment, I knew something inside me was about to break. The word pregnant hung in the air like smoke. I forced my face into something that resembled a smile because that's what was expected of me. Because everyone was watching. Because Stella's eyes were shining with excitement and Derek was already unwrapping tacos like this was a victory lap. "Wow," I said softly. "Congratulations." Inside, my chest felt hollow. Another baby meant another year of diapers, sleepless nights, pediatric appointments, school pickups, laundry that never ended. Another human life that would somehow, inevitably, become my responsibility too. That night, after the kids were asleep and the house finally quiet, Stella dropped the part she'd been rehearsing. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, fingers laced together, Derek leaning against the counter with that familiar, lazy confidence that always made my skin crawl. "We've been talking," Stella said carefully, "about how things are going to work." My fork paused halfway to my mouth. "With the baby coming," Derek added, "we're going to need more help." I waited. "You're already amazing with the kids," Stella continued. "Honestly, we don't know what we'd do without you." There it was, the compliment that always came right before the ask. "We think," Derek said, shrugging, "it makes sense for you to quit Starbucks. Focus on the kids full time." I stared at him. "Quit my job?" I repeated. "Just for a while," Stella said quickly, "until the baby's a little older." My pulse started racing. "And," she added, not meeting my eyes, "we're tight on money, so we'd need you to chip in $400 a month for rent." $400. The number echoed in my head. I was already paying for their kids' school supplies, their clothes, their doctor visits, their extracurricular fees. I'd drained my savings to keep their household functioning, and now they wanted more. "I can't," I said quietly. "I already do everything. I work, I take care of the kids, I'm in school." Derek scoffed. "You live here. You eat our food. It's only fair." Fair. That word hit harder than I expected. "So you want me to quit my job," I said slowly, "watch 5 kids, and pay rent. With what money?" "Well, I pushed my plate away. "I need time to think," I said, standing before they could respond. That night, I lay awake listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of Derek laughing at something on his phone, and I felt something shift inside me, a quiet, terrifying clarity. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as labor. "They want me to quit my job and pay rent," I said, pacing. "They want everything." "They're using you," she said flatly, "and they'll keep pushing until you have nothing left." Her words stung because they were true. Over the next few days, the pressure escalated. Derek suggested I sell my old catering equipment to help the family. That was the moment I knew. They weren't asking for help. They were erasing me. I started noticing things I'd ignored before. How Stella slept through arguments while I mediated. How Derek disappeared into the garage every night while I cooked dinner. How decisions were made without me, yet somehow always landed on my shoulders. One evening, David caught me scrolling through apartment listings. "You okay?" he asked, his sarcasm gone. "I'm trying to be," I said honestly. He nodded, like he understood more than I wanted him to. That night, I sat with a notebook and did the math. Studios downtown, around $1,200 a month. Utilities and food, $600. Classes, $300. My Starbucks pay could just cover it if I cut corners. My savings could handle the deposit. Fear and excitement tangled in my chest. I could leave, but the kids' faces haunted me. A few days later, Stella cornered me in the kitchen. "You've been acting weird," she said. "Planning to bail on us?" "I'm planning my life," I replied calmly. She scoffed. "Typical. Always about you." The words hurt, but they didn't stop me anymore. I signed the lease a week later. Moving day was quiet. I packed my boxes while the kids were at school. I left my room spotless, took nothing that wasn't mine. My new place was tiny, a Murphy bed, a kitchenette, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I slept without guilt. 3 days later, my phone rang. "This is Officer Martinez with the Phoenix Police Department." My stomach dropped. "We've received a complaint. Can you meet us at your sister's address?" When I arrived, Stella was already on the porch, eyes blazing. "She stole money," she shouted. "Destroyed our property." I felt sick. Inside, she pointed out a hole in the wall, a broken dishwasher. "I didn't do this," I said firmly. David stepped forward. "My mom's lying," he said, voice steady. "That hole's been there for months. Derek punched it. The dishwasher broke weeks ago." Silence. The officers exchanged looks. "False reports are serious," one said to Stella. When they left, I hugged David so tightly my chest ached. "You didn't have to," I whispered. "You didn't deserve it," he replied. That night, I knew. There was no going back. For a brief moment after the police left, I believed the worst was over. That belief didn't last. The first few days in my studio apartment felt unreal, like I was trespassing inside my own life. The space was small enough that I could touch the kitchen counter from my bed if I stretched, but every inch belonged to me. No toys on the floor, no alarms screaming before dawn, no voices demanding pieces of me before I'd even had coffee. I set my laptop on the narrow desk beneath the window and lined up my coding books like proof that I hadn't imagined this dream. At night, the city hummed softly outside, and for the first time in years, I slept without feeling like someone needed me every second. I texted the kids that first evening. "I'm okay. I love you. I'll come visit soon." Sophia sent a heart. Mason asked if my apartment had a couch. Luna begged for a bedtime story over FaceTime. Stella didn't respond at all. Her silence should have been peaceful. Instead, it felt like a threat. 3 days after the police incident, Jasmine called me during her lunch break. "She's furious," she warned. "People who lose control don't let go quietly." I wanted to believe Stella would cool off, that she'd crossed a line and knew it. I was wrong. A week later, I got a call from David. His voice was tight, controlled in that way only teenagers who've been forced to grow up too fast manage. "Mom's in the hospital," he said. "Something's wrong with the pregnancy." The room seemed to tilt. "What kind of wrong?" I asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "They won't tell us much. The kids are scared." Despite everything, the lies, the police, the betrayal, my first thought was of Luna crying herself to sleep and Sophia pretending to be brave. Of Mason asking questions no one would answer. I drove to Phoenix General without thinking. The waiting room smelled like antiseptic and anxiety. David sat with his arms crossed, jaw clenched. Sophia leaned against him, eyes red. Mason fidgeted nonstop. Luna clung to my hand the second she saw me. Dr. Williams met us a few minutes later. "Your sister has gestational diabetes," she explained calmly. "She'll need strict bed rest, possibly until delivery." "How long?" I asked. 4 months, minimum. 4 months. I closed my eyes. When I finally saw Stella, she looked smaller, pale, stripped of her usual fire. "The kids need you," she said quietly, not meeting my eyes. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of what she'd done. I felt something inside me harden. "I'll help," I said slowly, "but only for them, and only on my terms." She frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means I keep my job. I keep my apartment. I don't pay rent. I don't move back in. I help for 4 months, and that's it." She hesitated, then nodded. She didn't have leverage anymore. Back at the house, chaos reigned. Dirty dishes stacked in the sink. Laundry overflowing. Homework scattered across the table like abandoned plans. Derek was nowhere to be seen. "He's been working late," David muttered, "every night." I stepped in, but differently this time. David and Sophia split chores. Mason organized his backpack every night. Luna helped set the table. "You're a team," I told them, "not my responsibility alone." I came after my Starbucks shifts, cooked dinner, helped with homework, then I left. Every night, I went back to my apartment. "Why can't you stay?" Sophia asked once, eyes glistening. "I'm here," I said gently. "Just not like before." She nodded, even though I could tell she didn't fully understand. Derek's absence grew more obvious by the day. One night, Luna cried herself to sleep because he missed her school play. "He said he'd come," she sobbed. David scoffed from the doorway. "He's checked out, always has been." By the second month, routines settled into place. Stella called occasionally, asking for updates, but I kept conversations short. I wasn't there to manage her emotions anymore. David stepped up in ways that broke my heart. Grocery runs, bedtime routines, calming Luna's nightmares. "I'm scared for Mom," he admitted one night, "but I'm mad too." I understood that feeling too well. 4 months passed faster than I expected. Stella came home with her newborn son, Diego, wrapped in a blue blanket. I helped settle the kids, stocked the fridge, and then I stood in the kitchen, keys in my hand. "I'm done," I said quietly. Stella's eyes flashed. "You're abandoning us again." "I've given enough," I replied. "They're your kids. Step up." She turned away. I walked out. This time, I didn't look back. I couldn't leave the kids unsupported, though. I called Jasmine and asked her to be their point of contact. She agreed immediately. I sent $75 a month for school supplies and treats, video calls twice a week, homework help, bedtime stories. No direct contact with Stella. Word filtered back slowly. Stella lost her job. Derek left one night without explanation. The house grew quieter, heavier. I focused on what I could control. My classes paid off. A classmate connected me with a small business needing a website. That led to another, then another. The night I earned $800 for a single project, I cried. 6 months later, David called with news that left me shaking. "Child services got involved," he said. "We're moving in with Aunt Rosa." Relief and grief tangled together. A year later, I ran my own web development agency. 6 employees, a real office. The kids were thriving with Rosa. Stella was finally getting help. Standing in my office, watching the sunset, I understood the truth I'd fought for so long. Sometimes loving someone means walking away. Walking away should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like learning how to breathe again after years underwater. Slow, shaky, unfamiliar. The first week after I left for good, I woke up disoriented every morning. No alarm at 5:15, no small hands tugging at my sleeve, no mental checklist of who needed lunch money, whose homework was due, who had a recital, who needed allergy meds. Just silence and guilt. It crept in during the quiet moments, when I made coffee and didn't have to water it down to stretch the pot. When I worked uninterrupted for 3 straight hours on a website layout and realized no one was going to burst in asking for snacks. I reminded myself why I'd left. Still, I couldn't cut the kids off emotionally. I just couldn't let Stella pull me back into her gravity. That's where Jasmine came in. She became the buffer, the adult presence without the chaos. The one Stella couldn't manipulate the same way she'd manipulated me. Every Sunday evening, Jasmine sent me updates. David's grades, Sophia's art projects, Mason's science obsessions, Luna's bedtime stories. I sent money through Jasmine. Small amounts, controlled, intentional. Never directly to Stella. $75 for school supplies. $30 for groceries when Jasmine said the fridge was bare. Art supplies for Sophia's birthday. Sophia mailed me a picture a week later. Bright colors, messy brushstrokes, and crooked letters at the bottom. Best aunt ever. I stared at it for a long time. David stayed quieter. He texted when things got bad. Mom didn't get out of bed today. Derek's gone again. I'm trying. I wanted to drive over every time. To fix it. To take control like I always had. But I didn't. Because fixing Stella's life had nearly destroyed mine. Instead, I talked David through things, helped him plan homework schedules, encouraged him to ask Jasmine or a school counselor for help, reminded him over and over that none of this was his fault. Meanwhile, my own life began to change. Slowly at first. The web development projects stacked up one by one. Small businesses, local shops, a restaurant that needed online ordering. I worked late into the night, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. My tiny studio transformed. The Murphy bed stayed folded most days. The walls filled with sticky notes and wireframes. My laptop never left my side. When I landed my 4th steady client, I did the math twice, just to be sure. I could quit Starbucks. The day I handed in my notice, my manager blinked in surprise. "Good for you," she said. "Most people don't make it out." I walked out into the sunlight, feeling like I'd crossed an invisible line. Freedom wasn't loud. It was quiet, earned. Of course, Stella didn't disappear quietly. "She's asking about you again," Jasmine warned me one afternoon, "saying you owe her." I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "She tried to get me arrested," I said. "She lost that right." I made it clear. No messages passed along unless they were from the kids. No exceptions. David told me later Stella was behind on bills, that notices were piling up on the kitchen counter. I sent extra grocery money through Jasmine, and nothing else. I wouldn't reward chaos anymore. Months passed. Then one night, David called crying. "I'm tired," he said. "I feel like the adult." My heart cracked. "You're doing more than anyone should have to," I told him. "And it won't always be like this." I didn't know then how soon things would change. It happened quietly. A neighbor called someone. A teacher noticed patterns. Missed lunches. Unwashed clothes. Kids showing up exhausted. Child services stepped in. When David told me they were moving in with Aunt Rosa, Stella's older sister, my hands shook. Relief washed over me first. Then grief. Rosa was stable, warm. The kind of woman who cooked real dinners and sat at the table until homework was done. "Are you okay with it?" I asked David carefully. "Yeah," he said. "It's calm here. Weird, but good." I cried after we hung up. A year later, my life barely resembled the one I'd escaped. I ran my own web development agency now. 6 employees. Contracts that lasted months instead of weeks. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment with a dedicated office. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Real space to breathe. The kids visited regularly. Rosa encouraged it. No drama, no guilt, no manipulation. David was thriving. Sophia joined the art club. Mason built robots. Luna started piano lessons. Stella entered rehab. I hoped she healed. Truly. But I didn't go back. Standing in my office one evening, watching the Phoenix sunset bleed gold across the glass, I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who believed love meant sacrifice without limits. I'd learned the truth the hard way. Sometimes loving someone means walking away. Not because you don't care, but because you finally care about yourself too. The first time the kids visited my new apartment, Luna ran in circles like she'd just discovered gravity. "This is yours?" she asked, eyes wide, touching the window, the couch, the rug, like she needed proof. "All mine," I said, smiling. David stood near the doorway longer than the others, scanning the space quietly. He didn't comment on the view or the furniture. He just nodded once, like he was filing the moment away. Sophia wandered straight to my desk. "You work here?" she asked, fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Every day." She smiled, soft, proud, in a way that made my chest ache. It struck me then how different this felt from before. No tension. No fear of saying the wrong thing. No invisible weight pressing down on every interaction. Rosa made dinner while we talked. Real dinner. Plates at the table, homework checked without yelling, Luna laughing instead of crying herself to sleep. This was what stability looked like. I didn't realize how badly the kids had needed it until they had it. Over the following months, the visits became routine. Weekends, occasional school breaks, video calls whenever Luna decided she missed my voice. David grew taller, quieter, stronger in a way that no longer felt brittle. Sophia filled sketchbooks faster than I could buy them. Mason learned to solder wires for his robots. Luna practiced piano until her fingers cramped, then practiced more. They were finally kids again. Stella stayed in rehab longer than expected. Jasmine told me she'd agreed to it voluntarily, something I never thought I'd hear. Depression, burnout, years of unaddressed damage finally surfacing once there was no one left to cushion the fall. I felt compassion. I really did. But compassion didn't mean returning to the fire. I sent one message through Jasmine. "I hope you get better." For the kids. That was all. I never received a reply. A few months later, my agency landed its biggest contract yet, a full digital platform for a regional startup. The kind of project that would have terrified the old me. Instead, I felt ready. Late nights returned, but they were different now. Chosen, energizing, mine. One evening, while reviewing code, I caught my reflection in the darkened window. I barely recognized her. The woman staring back wasn't exhausted. She wasn't shrinking. She looked steady. I thought about the version of myself who'd once believed her worth was measured by how much she endured, how much she gave up, how much she could carry before breaking. I'd been wrong. Strength wasn't staying. Strength was leaving and surviving the guilt. David called me one night near the end of the school year. I got into the advanced math program, he said, trying to sound casual. That's huge, I said, grinning. There was a pause. I couldn't have done it without you, he added quietly. Something warm settled in my chest. You did it, I corrected gently. I just reminded you who you are. He laughed softly. You always do that. Sophia mailed me another painting soon after. This one was different, calmer. A house with open windows, 4 stick figures smiling in front. On the back, she'd written, "This is us now." I framed it. Not because it was perfect, but because it was honest. A year after everything fell apart, I hosted dinner in my apartment for the first time. Jasmine, Rosa, the kids. No drama. No apologies required. No history rehashed. Just food, conversation, laughter. At one point, Luna climbed into my lap, exhausted from piano practice and sugar. "Are you happy now?" she asked sleepily. The question caught me off guard. I didn't answer right away. I thought about the long nights, the fear, the moments I almost turned back, the police lights on my sister's porch, the way my hands shook when I signed that first lease. Then I thought about this moment. "Yes," I said finally, "I am." She nodded, satisfied, and fell asleep. Later that night, after everyone left, I stood alone in the quiet. I thought about Stella, about how close I'd come to disappearing inside someone else's life, about how easily love can turn into obligation when boundaries don't exist. I didn't hate her, but I no longer carried her, and that was the difference. Some stories end with reconciliation. Mine ended with clarity. I built a life that didn't require my sacrifice to function. The kids were safe, loved, growing. And I finally understood the lesson I'd fought for years to ignore. You can love deeply and still walk away. You can care without destroying yourself. You can choose peace, even when others call it selfish. Standing by the window, watching the city lights glow below, I knew this wasn't just an ending. It was the beginning I'd been denied for far too long. And this time, it was mine.